Everyone is familiar with the statement, if you or a loved one has mesothelioma, you may obtain financial compensation. Contact now and insert law firm. So were you financially compensated?
Such innocent victims because they were simply going to work to provide for their family. And the companies that provided the products were the ones that exposed them.
Do you fight for more research about mesothelioma, or do you fight more for stopping the use of asbestos completely? Like, what is your approach?
So finding the cancer was a shock to all of us. Yeah, complete and utter shock. And then they told me I had 15 months to live. And I was like, no, I have a new kid. I have a new baby. I need to be here and raise them. I told you only have 15 months to live or 12 months to live. You need something to give you hope.
The information in the podcast is not intended or implied to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Please talk to a medical professional before doing anything that may impact your health. Hello, welcome to my podcast, to Mics One JoeySooch. I am JoeySooch, and I'll be giving a mic to Heather von St. James. On February 2nd, 2021, she is currently a 15-year cancer survivor from mesothelioma. That is a huge deal to all that is listening. Yes, mesothelioma. That commercial you heard so often, but we will get to that in a little bit. She had needed her left lung to be removed to literally survive. She is also the mom to a transsexual man. For anybody who may be confused, they are born as a girl, but feel as they are a man. But first thing first, are you a freaking rock star or a closeted nerd? None or both?
Maybe both. Rockstar.
Everyone is familiar with the statement, if you or a loved one has mesothelioma, you may obtain financial compensation. Contact now and insert law firm. So were you financially compensated?
Actually, yes, I was, but I did not contact one off of TV. My law firm is called Early Lucarelli, Sweeney and Mice Coathen, and they are out of Connecticut. Great law firm. That's who I, hired, and they have done a great job with me. As a mesothelioma patient, I was harmed by exposure to asbestos. So mesothelioma is only caused by asbestos exposure. So at some point in my life, I was exposed to it. And the thing is, asbestos companies knew that their products and that asbestos caused cancer, but they kept it under wraps and still produced products and had people work with it because there's a 20 to 30, sometimes even up to 50-year latency period between exposure and the onset of disease. So they were thinking, well, nobody's going to connect the dots between me these people working with it and them dying 50 years later. So that was their erroneous thinking. And there's even like a famous, amongst, law firms and stuff, a quote in the mesothelioma community from one of the companies, like, well, if they made a good living from asbestos, why not die from it too? Or something along those lines. So these companies knew and willingly put people in harm's way. And it wasn't just the people who worked with it. It was their spouses, their kids, their grandkids, anybody who came into contact with them, the people who worked with it were also at risk for mesothelioma.
Really?
And that's how I got it, was secondhand exposure. My dad worked with asbestos when I was a child. So he did construction, and a lot of what he did was drywall work when he started, because he was learning the trade. And the guy's like, okay, you're going to do the grunt work. You're going to do the sanding. You're going to mix the stuff. Then you're going to sand it when it's dry and you're going to clean up. Well, that's where all the dust is. Asbestos is only harmful when it's airborne. And that's when you breathe it in or you ingest it. So my dad was mixing the drywall compound, which you dump the drywall compound into a bucket, poof, tons of dust. And then he would sand it off the walls when he was dry, dust. And this was back in the early 70s when they didn't really wear a lot of protective gear, nor did he know that the stuff was dangerous, despite warnings that were on the label, but nobody read that, So yeah, he would come home with it and it would be all over his jacket. It would be in his car. And so that's where my exposure came from, was like wearing my dad's jacket to do chores around the house in the yard. and feed my rabbits and stuff like that. So just riding in his car.
So when you say
that's where my exposure.
So when you say secondhand exposure, do you mean just so all you have to do is just breathe it in and that's how you're exposed? Or does it affect your skin at all, or just you have to breathe it in too?
You have to breathe it in. So the fibers are like super like microscopic. There's a graphic somewhere of a head of a penny, and there's like 10,000 fibers on Lincoln's head. And they're so microscopic, and you can breathe thousands of them in and not even know it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then what happens when you breathe them in is the fibers lodge themselves into the lung and they work their way out to the lining. And that's what causes the cancer. The lining of the organ is called the mesothelium, hence the name mesothelioma, cancer of the lining of the organs. So it's the lining of my lung where it settled.
The law firm that sue, is it one company or is it like a whole bunch of construction company? Like how do you sue someone?
So they know all of the companies that provided asbestos because they've been doing this for, decades. Mm-hmm. So they know of the companies that provided asbestos, where asbestos was located. My dad also had to rip apart a boiler, and the boiler was covered in asbestos. And I guess in every state there's a boiler registry because they're so giant and scary to work with.
Wait, what's a boiler?
Yeah, so there was a boiler that he basically took apart and it was covered in asbestos. So what they do is they look at all the companies that could have provided the asbestos and then they file, lawsuits against those. So I had multiple companies which provided the asbestos that I was exposed to.
But how did someone connect the dots from, you said could take 30 to 50 years to get any reaction? How did the dots get connected?
So there was a doctor, his name was, I believe, Irving Selikoff, and he was at Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York. And he is one of the doctors who first made the connection between shipyard workers and mesothelioma. So it was him who discovered it. And then the more research that was done, they finally made the connection that all these people that had been working with this substance are now getting sick all these years later. So he's like the father of mesothelioma diagnosis. And so, the asbestos companies knew. To this day, asbestos is still not banned in the United States.
Really?
So one would think that this substance that causes cancer, a horrible, horrible cancer, would be banned in a country such as ours, but it is not. It's still used in certain applications, like in the chloralkali industry, and it's like filters. And we've actually upped our imports of asbestos, which is scary. We don't produce it anymore. It was mined. It's a mineral that's mined out of the earth. And it was in a lot of talc products because talc deposits and asbestos deposits are usually found together. So like Johnson & Johnson baby powder was responsible for many mesothelioma cases as well. So that can be an exposure as well.
So how a company still all around when it affects thousands of people?
Money, government, money. It's who they have in their pocket. And
when you get financially compensated, is it different per different person, or is it depends how good of a lawyer you have, or how it?
Pretty much depends on your case, depends on your state. It's kind of shitty, actually, if you want my honest opinion, because it's in England, each asbestos victim gets X amount of dollars.
Wait, it's an international
asbestos? Issue? Yeah. It's a worldwide, it's a global issue. Actually, Australia, it's almost an epidemic in Australia. Australia has, more mesothelioma per capita than most any country. Because there was big mines of it in Australia and they used it often. England has a lot of mesothelioma because of imports. They imported it and used it in shipbuilding and stuff like that. Mesothelioma or asbestos was never used or mined in England or Great Britain, but it was all imported. So everybody that got sick from it there is because of industry and household use. But no, it's a global problem. It's everywhere. There's mines in Brazil, there's mines in Russia, and it's used throughout the entire world. And it's construction. It's fireproof. It's durable. The fibers, when mixed with other like cement and stuff, it's incredibly durable. But once it starts breaking apart and falling apart, it's airborne and then it causes cancer. So they make houses out of it in India, in Turkey. There's places in Turkey where there's actually like whole homes made with, this asbestos mud, basically. So yeah, it's a global problem. It's not just something in the United States. I get people from literally all over the world contacting me. Turkey, Pakistan, China, Japan, Australia, England, France.
Wow, I had absolutely no idea. I just saw the commercials. I just assumed it was the USA problem.
Nope. There's actually a town in Canada that was named Asbestos because of the asbestos mine up there. And they were trying to reopen it recently in the last probably 5 years. So now they're trying to rename the town because of the name associated with it.
So are there
any reputation.
Is there any safe way to deal with asbestos, or is it basically the same problem?
If there is a safe way to deal with it. Obviously, the people who do the abatement, who go into homes and businesses and legally and lawfully take it out, know how to deal with it correctly. But you have to wear like a hazmat suit and have the blowers and the showers and all that stuff, and then have the right instruments and the right equipment to take it out and deal with it. So it can be, but most people don't take those precautions, nor do people know how to. So now the number one exposure is actually what we call legacy asbestos, which is asbestos that's already in place in homes, that's in like pretty much any home built before 1980. And people go in and do renovations, and they tear into their house and they, tear out pipes and all of this stuff that probably has asbestos tape or asbestos in it at some point. And then they expose their whole family, and, they won't know for 10, 15, 20 years whether or not any harm was done. So that's why you want to hire somebody to check your house out to make sure it's safe before you go in and renovate.
Yeah, because,
it's scary.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to you earlier because our family was doing an apartment, and it was built before in the 1980s. And I mean, I know the result now, but if you have told me that the apartment might have asbestos, I would be freaking out right now. But they
did they take precautions?
No, but they were very strict about redoing. We had to redo the bathroom, so they required an asbestos test to be done, which is I never really heard of till I got to figure how strict they are, and it's a blessing that we didn't have any of it. And so, like, I'm kind of surprised they didn't use asbestos when you say that it's so great with materials and such. So, I mean, it was a blessing because who knows how much damage it could cause, the people that live there and then my family and then me, if we still had it, not knowing.
Yeah. I think most places do before they renovate anything that was built before 1980, especially commercial or, like apartment buildings, have to test for asbestos before they renovate because of the exposure risk to the tenants. So, and then if it's not there, thank God, and if it is there, they can take the precautions to abate it before they move forward. So
yeah, I guess it's more to protect the workers than the people living in it.
Both, absolutely both. Yeah, it's crazy. It's a whole political mess that I never even knew existed when I was diagnosed 16 years ago. It wasn't until a few years in of, finding out more and more about it that I realized it was still legal, that it was, how I got it for one, so the law firm really helped educate me, like where it came from. And then the Mesothelioma Applied Research Foundation, which is a nonprofit I volunteer with, has been instrumental in educating me as far as like where the asbestos came from and stuff like that.
So is mesothelioma basically a new cancer that we created?
It's been around ever since asbestos has been around, but they didn't know. It was probably misdiagnosed a lot as lung cancer or uterine cancer or bowel cancer. And so it was probably misdiagnosed for centuries, the wasting disease or whatever. So, but it's been being diagnosed since the early 1900s. So maybe relatively new, 18, late 1800s, early 1900s. But it's rare because only about 3,000 people a year are diagnosed with it. So it's very rare.
But you're
And
saying
that's
it's
Americans.
Rare now or before?
It was rare before, and it's even, now it's rare too. Yeah, because people can be exposed and not get it. Like my dad never had mesothelioma, despite him working with it, but he died of kidney cancer.
Really?
So, but the kidney cancer could have been caused by the asbestos. So, but we don't know for sure. And there's no other cancer in my family. So just the two of us, which is really interesting. So, and we're the only two that had asbestos exposure.
Do you have any other family members that got affected by the asbestos, or just you?
No, just me. My mom's had a CT scan and everything's clear for her. And so is my sister, and they're both clear. So but they didn't spend the time. Not that my mom didn't spend time around my dad, but now when he got home from work, my mom was still working. So when my dad came home from work, I was right there to greet him, and I would hug him when he got home. And my sister was, teenager. So she didn't hang out with my dad like I did. And my mom worked, till 5, 6 at night. So she wasn't home when my dad got home. And so I was always the one to greet my dad, and I would wear his coat and hug him and hang out with him in the yard, or he had this garage he would hang out in. I'd go out there with him, and that was basically a shadow from the time he got home from work. So I spent far more time with him after he directly came home from work than my sister and my mom did. And by the time they came home, he had already showered and stuff like that. So, but both my mom and my sister have been tested, had CT scans. There is no early detection for mesothelioma. There's no tests that you can take to see if you've been exposed or anything like that. There's just an early CT, and then have one every 5 years to look for changes is really the only thing that you can do.
Seems like the only way to do it is really just prevent it.
Yeah, right now.
But
prevent exposure.
But you literally had no idea that.
No.
I would have.
No.
But
it was 1975, 74, 73. I was a little kid. So
I guess loving dad too much is not a good thing.
Nah, it's always a great thing.
Okay.
It is what it is.
Did your dad blame him? Did your dad know about your diagnosis? Did he blame himself a little bit?
I told him that he didn't hold, I never blamed him, but he held a lot of personal, he's I should have known, but he was really able to make peace with it. We talked a lot about it, that it was not him, it was the companies he worked for, or the companies that provided the asbestos. My dad was just trying to provide for his family. Like any of these guys that get it, or any of the wives or kids that get it, such innocent victims, because they were simply going to work to provide for their family. And the companies that provided the products were the ones that exposed them. Not them doing the work. They were doing what they were told and trying to live.
It wasn't like he was being reckless or anything. He was just
doing. In the Navy, the armed forces were a huge. The hulls of ships had asbestos in them, probably still do. So there's a lot of Navy veterans that are diagnosed and have died from mesothelioma. So that's a whole big thing. Firefighters are notoriously famous for mesothelioma. Mesothelioma is probably one of the most devastating workplace diseases there is. So,
but wouldn't a women be not exposed, because when they go into a building, they're required to wear the oxygen mask and stuff.
But they're in a building that's falling apart and everything's dusty and exposed, and they're around that stuff all the time, and it's on their clothes, and it's crazy. See, my dad was a volunteer fireman too, so it could have come from some of that.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
No, you're getting it from everywhere.
Yeah. And all the first in New York, all the first responders, a lot of them are now dying from cancers caused from all the chemicals and the tons of asbestos that was in the Twin Towers. So thank God for that, compensation fund.
It was just ridiculous how it took 20 years for them to be covered. Like we
Yeah,
had I remember John Stewart gave a speech about it, like that he was just saying that like you're using these guys at a pawn when they just went into these buildings, not even thinking about anything else. And it took 20 years for them just to be covered. And it's like ridiculous.
They were doing their job and doing what they love. And this is how it's infuriating. So that's what I deal with a lot. That's the sort of thing I deal with a lot is the legal aspect and the government aspect of it. Like fighting for the rights of asbestos victims is a big part of what I do. I've been to the Capitol Hill many times to talk to people about it and fight for the rights of asbestos victims for funding and that sort of stuff.
So do you fight for more research about mesothelioma, or do you fight more for stopping the use of asbestos completely? Like, what is your approach?
My approach is more for funding for rare diseases and mesothelioma. Right now, we need research more than anything. I don't know if asbestos will ever be fully banned. They've been trying for 30 years, since 1980, to get it banned, and nothing's happening. I've looked at it hard and long, and I did do some work early on about it and told my story, and people are aware, but nothing ever happens. The needle never moves one way or the other. And then you have one administration that wants to help you. The next administration comes in and his picture is on bales of asbestos coming out of Russia. So that's what we're up against. Every administration is different. So I would rather put my time and energy into finding a cure, funding research, helping researchers who are so passionate about the disease and finding a cure, and helping with the CDRMP, which is Congressionally Directed Medical Review Panel. It's a mouthful. They fund research for rare cancers. So I volunteered on that for 2 years. So yeah, that's where I like to put my energy is more for funding and research and the rights of asbestos victims. That's kind of where my niche is, I guess.
So I have here that after 3.5 months after the birth of your daughter, you were diagnosed with malignant pleural mesothelioma. I'm assuming it wasn't related to the pregnancy at all. I know it's just a random that you just got diagnosed, or like how did it go from giving birth to your daughter and then having mesothelioma?
So I joke and say that I was growing a tumor and a baby at the same time. So my specialist who I saw thinks that the estrogen and the hormones of the pregnancy may have spurred on the growth of the tumor. Now, is that studied and for sure? No, that's just a theory that he has, a hypothesis that he has. So
it's a very unique case.
Yeah, so I only gained 5 pounds throughout the whole pregnancy.
Whoa.
I never really gained any weight, just 5 pounds. And my doctor was like, oh, you're eating healthier, you're fine, your weight's fine, the baby's growing, everything's okay. You're going to be fine. So, and she was, when he was born, he was 8 pounds, 14 ounces. So he was healthy, so that was not the case. But the tumor was taking everything else, that the baby wasn't getting. So, and I had a C-section and I just never recovered. I just kept getting more and more tired and I was losing weight like crazy. And then I couldn't breathe. My doctor thought I had a heart virus that happens to some women postpartum. So finding the cancer was a shock to all of us. Yeah, complete and utter shock. And then they told me I had 15 months to live. And I was like, no, I have a new kid. I have a new baby. I need to be here and raise them. What can you do for me? And so that's when I was referred to a specialist in Boston. So thank God. So he saved my life.
So it just seemed that you were not feeling well and then someone recommended you to go to this doctor and then they diagnosed you with mesothelioma?
Yeah, I couldn't breathe. It's like literally I was only like, I could never get a full breath. And I felt like I had to cough and nothing would come up. And so I knew and then I had this fever that wouldn't go away. So I thought I had pneumonia or something. So yeah, I went and saw my doctor and he did some blood work. I was like, the blood work's not right. There's something going on here. Let's do a chest x-ray. And when he did the chest x-ray, he saw fluid around my lung. So, and the fluid was caused because the tumor was there and the fluid builds up to protect the lung from the tumor. basically. So I had fluid between my lung and the lining of it to protect my lung from the tumor. And I had to go and have that drained. So it's called a thoracentesis. And they stick a giant needle in your back and pull the fluid out. And that was the doctor who actually found the mesothelioma and diagnosed me through a CT scan and stuff.
Wait,
so yeah, 3-month-old baby.
So I'm a little confused. So is it that you have a mesothelioma is it affects the lining of your lung, and then you had a tumor? So is it two separate things or one?
The tumor of mesothelioma presents like orange peels. So it's like, it's not like, a round chunk or, like a mass, like what you think a tumor is. What it is, it looks like an orange peel. So I had in the lower part of my left lung, the lining of the lung, the outside of it was all hardened like an orange peel. So, and it was about 4 inches in diameter or across. So there was an actual tumor. Mesothelioma causes tumors on the lining of the organs. It changes the lining into cancer cells. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So then I'm guessing that's why they had to remove your left lung to get rid of the tumors so it wouldn't spread to your right lung?
Yep. Or anywhere else in my body, because it could have gone to my belly, because you have mesothelium in your belly as well. Mesothelium lines all your organs, lines your lung, it lines your heart, lines your intestines, your stomach, your liver, your kidneys, your, everything. So they took the lung, very aggressive, I was like, do whatever you can, be aggressive as you can. So he took the entire lung, the lining.
Wait, was that the original plan going into surgery? Or?
Yep, I knew what I was doing. I knew what I was going in for. So he wanted to be aggressive, and I was like, do it. I want to live. So do whatever you need to do. So that was the original plan. It's called an extrapleural pneumonectomy, a very long word for a big surgery. So
I get why they removed the lung, and it's amazing that you're 15 years cancer free, but since it obsessive kind of affects everything, couldn't it affect anything at any point? Like why?
Absolutely.
Yeah, like why removing the lung will prevent other things if it could affect everything else?
It could come back at any time. I mean, and that's something I live with. It absolutely could. There's a lot of people I know that have bicavity where it's in their belly and their lung. I know people who it starts in their belly and then it spreads to their lung. So, it's just mesothelioma is not like any other cancer. It's very, very odd. A lot of times the only reason it spreads is it's not caught early enough. And I was very fortunate that we caught mine early. And we were very aggressive with the treatments. But I also live with the knowledge that I could get a scan tomorrow and it could be there. So, but I don't live in fear of that. And I don't, live my life going, it's back. Not anymore. I used to, but, putting this many years between me and my diagnosis. So yeah, that the fact that it could come back is always there. So you're absolutely right.
So
it's very possible.
But I'm sure you talk to a lot of mesothelioma patients. So are you one of the luckier ones to be cancer-free for 15 years?
Absolutely. And that's why I am so vocal and so public, because you need hope, when you're told to get your affairs in order and, told you only have 15 months to live or 12 months to live, you need something to give you hope. I had a young woman whose name was Karen, who gave me the hope that I needed when I was diagnosed. And so I wanted to be that for other people. And I wanted to do it as long as I could, as long as I'm still here, I want to help people and give people hope. And so, yeah, last year it dawned on me, like 15 years is a huge deal to survive any cancer, really, let alone mesothelioma that kills, 95% of the people in the first 18 months.
Whoa, that's high.
Yeah, it's really, the statistics are horrid. And so the fact that I'm still here is not lost. I feel incredibly blessed and lucky and very happy that I had such aggressive treatment and such a good doctor. So.
Well, I'm glad you're here to alive that I can interview you.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah. I'm gonna assume that affects the lungs the most.
Yes.
And then other parts of the body, but it seems to be a more complex cancer because, like, when you say you have kidney cancer, it just stays in the kidneys but doesn't really spread. But for you, it can kind of just go everywhere, so you're never like fully safe even after the surgery. So
that's why I get scanned every 6 months, just to try and stay ahead of it. And being here 15 years, almost 16 years, I've really seen a lot of advancements in treatments and surgical treatments and non-surgical treatments. So, because surgery has its drawbacks, it's not all wine and rose. Everything isn't great. I'm alive, yes, but I have a lot of issues from the surgery, but I'm still here. So, you got to weigh it out. But knowing that there's other opportunities and other treatments, if it comes back,
well,
that I know that there's
now versus 15 years ago.
The surgical approach has been refined a lot more, where they're saving the lung more often. So they're not removing the entire lung, they're saving the lung, only removing the lining and the tumor, which is better for the patient. Chemotherapy there's a couple more drugs that people are using for the chemotherapy. Immunotherapy is a game changer in a lot of cancers. So they're coupling immunotherapy with chemotherapy, and that's having incredible results for people. So extending their life far longer than they originally thought, shrinking tumors and giving them hope.
Well, and I'm guessing in the future, let's say another 15 years, like stem cell research will help a lot with you. But they could just replace the whole lung, I guess.
It's like, could I grow another lung? I don't know. Yeah.
I feel like it would solve all your problems at this point.
Maybe. If I could get my nerve damage taken care of, that would make me a lot happier. But
well, let's talk about the nerve damage. So was that a common side effect of it, or was it a mishap from a doctor, or how did?
Well, it was a big experiment, for one, because when I had the surgery, it was a clinical trial. So, and he'd never really had such long-term survivors. So there was really no roadmap to follow.
When did mesothelioma, was there like a peak of I guess diagnosis or something?
They said it was like the mid 80s or 90s, but I don't really think there is. I think it just is kind of like slowly rising. They thought it would peak and then fall off, but it hasn't. So there's still people being diagnosed. Actually, there's younger people being diagnosed now than ever before.
Really?
So yeah. When I was diagnosed at 36, I was one of the youngest ones, and that was 15 years ago. Now I know a 19-year-old. I've heard of a 17-year-old having it.
Oh my God.
I have a friend, Linda, who was diagnosed when she was 16. It's like crazy.
I'm like surprised because we were just talking about when you do new construction, they do asbestos testing. So I just feel like the number would be dropping slowly, but to hear a 17-year-old being exposed to it is crazy.
And it's hard to track where the asbestos came from when it's a 17-year-old.
And then you can't get financially compensated for it anymore. Yeah, before I interrupted you, so what changed now from 15 years ago to now?
Like I said, the surgery technique is a lot better. There's far more clinical trials with immune checkpoint inhibitors and all these words that I can't even begin to say. But there was only one clinical trial when I was diagnosed. And now there's multiple at, large centers throughout the country. Houston, Boston, the National Institute of Health in DC, Sloan Kettering. Actually, the board of directors of the Meso Foundation that I volunteer with is at Sloan Kettering. She's a meso specialist, Dr. Marjorie Zotterer, and she's conducting the trial. So there's way more clinical trials to try if traditional methods don't work. So I know that if it were to come back, I have that going for me. And I put enough time between my diagnosis and now that I could go back to chemo, which was very responsive for me. I could do chemo again and not have as many ill effects. The nerve damage I have was not from the surgery, but from the radiation. So the radiation, they did my entire left quadrant of my body. This whole lung from up here down the middle and down to like it clipped the top of my stomach. So what it did is it hit my brachial plexus nerve, which provides all the nerve endings to your hand.
Mm-hmm.
And so over starting about 2 years in, I started noticing like my pinky was going numb, and then it has just spread across my whole hand. So now my hand doesn't work normally like my other one. I can, it's like just not responsive. So it's numb all the time. It feels like it's asleep all the time. So but I went to physical therapy and all that stuff, and they said it's nerve damage from radiation. It burned the myelin sheath off.
Negligence of the nurse?
Nope.
It's just a side effect of
just radiation. That's what happens. It's crapshoot.
Because I don't hear it happening today. So has anything changed, or is it not common that it happens?
It's been such a slow progression that, and then scar tissue build up, because when you have the surgery, your arm is over your head and they put you on your side to take out the lung. So, it could be scar tissue in my shoulder from being in that weird position for so long. And I have a frozen shoulder from the surgery because I can't move my arm very hard. So there's just, it's like all this weird stuff. My whole left side of my body is affected from it. I have scoliosis now. My spine is curved because your lung takes up a lot of room. And you don't realize how much room your lung takes up till it's gone. And so I've lost 2 inches. I used to be 5'10", now I'm 5'8", and I'm not happy about it. But yeah, it's just things that happen, but you take it with a grain of salt because I'm still alive and I have a very good life. I'm very happy. It's just inconvenient.
How did you lose height when you took your lung out?
Because your lung takes up space and then there's nothing holding it there. So my spine and my heart moved over. So your spine isn't held up by everything has a place in your body. And when you remove something, things happen and things move around. So
yeah, I didn't realize that lung is like a supporting pillar to your body.
Kind of. Yeah. It's a muscle, it's an organ and a muscle, and it takes up space. And so it's gone. And so there's just fluid in there. So it's like a water, just fluid in the left half of my chest. My diaphragm on the left half of my body is made of Gore-Tex. So I don't even have a diaphragm on the left half anymore because I don't have a lung. There's no reason to have a diaphragm. So it just keeps all the fluid in, and it keeps everything down. Because if you don't replace the diaphragm, all of your intestines and stuff will like go up into your chest cavity because the body seeks to fill a void. So my heart has moved, my right lung has increased in size, and my heart's kind of moved over. And I've got things that have kind of shifted inside. All of us that have had our lung removed are like, yeah, stuff's not quite right. I have to be careful when I eat because my stomach's weird. And so, yeah, everything shifts. It's like, you don't know that going into it. It's like you don't know this until you're through it. It's like, well, that's news to me. So, all right.
It's just crazy to me that you could just remove like a whole lung and still like live. Like,
so the Pope only has one lung.
Really?
What? Yeah, he had like a childhood disease or a virus or something, and they took his lung. So I thought that was interesting.
So like, do you feel that you have like a lung missing, or like do you? feel?
I don't know. It's, I don't notice. Like I get short of breath, like going upstairs or like carrying heavy stuff is really hard. I'm incredibly I hate working out. I'm lazy. I don't like working out. If I were to work out, I'd probably feel a lot better, but I do yard work and hang out with my kid and play with the dogs.
Do you pretend to be in shape when you go upstairs when people passes you?
No. I don't care. It's like if they look at me funny, I'm like, I have one lung.
Yeah, so I have here that February 2nd is your lung leaving day.
Yeah.
So how does it feel to have a missing lung? Like, what can you not do anymore? Or anything you want to do? Like, what do you wish you could do?
I don't have the stamina I used to have, and I don't know if that's more from having the lung gone or just having the chemo and the radiation and all that stuff, or the cancer itself. I wish I had more energy. If I worked out, I would have more energy, but it's one of those things I don't have the energy to work out. So, I pretty much do whatever I want to do, to be honest with you. I was never a runner, so I'm not going to run a marathon. But if I wanted to, having one lung wouldn't stop me, because I know people have ran marathons with one lung. So it's just, I do whatever I want. I enjoy it. If I need help with something, I ask people around me to help me, and I try not to let it, stop me from doing anything in any way. I probably will never go scuba diving. That is one thing I probably would never do.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a good idea.
So yeah. And I'm mountain climbing. Probably wouldn't be mountain climbing because that altitude is hard on you when you only have one lung.
Oh yeah.
But that's not something I would do normal. So
how is it like going on a plane?
Fine. Yeah, I never have issues on planes. But I haven't been on a plane in 2 years ever since COVID happened. But no, I used to fly all the time. Never had an issue. Very lucky.
Yeah, so you probably, when you gave birth to your daughter, that it was a blessing that they can help you out now.
When I was 28, I changed my whole life. So 28 was like an awesome year. So I'm excited for you because 28 was fun. 28, I was married to my ex-husband. And I woke up one day, I was like, I hate this life. I went to New York City actually for a haircutting class, and like realized what a beautiful, incredible world there was out there. Because New York is just amazing. It's got its own life, its own energy.
Oh yeah, I live here.
Yeah, I know. And so it's like I went to New York for this haircutting class on Fifth Avenue, and just was in awe of the city. Yeah, I just loved it. And stayed at some dive hotel and had a blast. And I literally came alive that week. Like something woke up in me, like there's a bigger, better life. I lived in a small town in Wyoming, for God's sake.
Wow.
And I came home and I looked at my ex-husband's like, this isn't working. I can't live here anymore. And so at 28, I divorced him and I up and moved to Minneapolis on my own. I literally threw a dart at a map and said I move into the next biggest city that this dart lands next to, and I was close to Minneapolis.
Okay.
So it's like I'm moving wherever this dart lands. And I was secretly hoping for Denver, but I guess my aim was off. I hit Minneapolis. So I ended up in Minneapolis, and it's been the best move. So I'm excited for your 28th year and 29th year, because it was huge change. Like, yeah, I kind of woke up and was like, oh, there's life to live. There's like a whole nother big thing out there. And so 30s were awesome.
Wait, so how old were you when you were diagnosed with cancer?
I was 36. I was young.
So would you say you had like a rebirth of a rebirth when you were when you found out that you were gonna live and stuff? Like, did you have another rebirth almost?
Almost, yeah. You have a different appreciation for So when I was 28 and said, screw this, I'm gonna live life on my own terms, and moved out here on a whim, was a different type of reawakening. It's like that was the first time
it's ballsy
about me.
Sure.
And my mom thought I was crazy. My dad was go for it.
I think you're a little crazy, but okay.
I am. I'm a lot crazy, and I'm totally okay with that.
You need to tone it down for the podcast.
I'm sorry. So no. Yeah. And so when I was diagnosed with cancer, and going through that, and I suppose you understand this too, when you're diagnosed with the disease, you can have one of two attitudes: poor me and be the victim.
Mm-hmm. Or
you can be like, oh, screw this. I got one life to live. I'm going to do what I can. And I've seen some of the things that you do, because I did my research too. But you don't just sit in your apartment and let life pass you by. You're out there going to concerts, and you're navigating the city. And I have another friend who has spina bifida. So I find it interesting, all your posts about wheelchair accessibility, because Thomas started a whole thing about wheelchair accessibility in the Twin Cities and how difficult it is to get around. So yeah, so it's just, I digress. So yeah, it was a rebirth of a rebirth. I look at things vastly different than I did when I was 28. I kind of just don't care anymore and have fun and enjoy life. My friendships, I have fewer friends, I would say, than I did before, but they're tighter and they're closer because I know they're really for me. Because when I got sick, everybody who I thought was my friend, poof, they were gone. I lost my business, which, hurt more than anything, almost more than the cancer. And I realized that the people who are there for you through thick and thin are never who you think they will be. And it really made me research my heart, who was important to me, what I care about, and what I'm going to lend my energies to. So yeah, it was definitely a reawakening of who I am and what I want out of life.
Yeah, like one of the things I always say in my mind, and some people that haven't gone through it don't agree with me, but I think everyone should always have a really dark moment in their lives. And that makes you reevaluate a lot of things. Like one, it could be your life, and then another, it's like your friend. You find out who your real friends are and such, and then like you kind of like reset on your life, and you kind of put more energy into things that you love. So like you mentioned the friends, and like for me, I didn't really have a lot of friends, but like I definitely knew who not to put my energy in anymore when I was better now, and I don't anymore. I'm also way past like there are people that have cared about a lot and like show my caringness for them, but they never reciprocated. And like maybe before I would have continued it, but like now I just tell them like this isn't working anymore. Like I don't feel treated the same way as I treated you, and it's like not fair to me. And then they kind of put it back at to me, and it's like, this is how I treat my other people. And I'm like, this is not a good way to treat people. Like, you know, like if you're happy with your other friendships, awesome. But like, I can't do this anymore. And it just sucks though, because you're more alone in life. But I guess at the same time, you're only putting energy toward people that, you know, you actually like you and you like them, or at least they tolerate you.
Well, I think it's been cool too being part of the patient community, the patient advocacy community, because don't you find that, you know, when you meet other patient advocates, no matter what disease it is, no matter what you deal with, whether it be cancer or whether it be, you know, the FOP, we understand, you know, the hardships and the fleeting, like you said, I'm not going to put my energies into these friendships if I'm not going to get it back. Because we all understand that. And I think as advocates, we all kind of have that in common, and we know. And so we recognize that in one another and can kind of lean on one another that way. At least I've been that way with, you know, the other advocates.
Yeah, what I like about the rare community or the disease community in general, there's like a mutual understanding among everyone. You don't really have to like explain much. Like, yeah, we have totally different diseases and such. And there'll definitely be things like would never ever be able to understand. Like let's say getting chemo or getting a lung removed, but like there's a mutual understanding on like deep levels that I want to say that very few people will understand. And like we don't have to explain ourselves to each other. Like we just know and then we also know how to help too. So so it's like a lot easier to, let's say, open up to you versus a regular person that never really had a severe hardship like we had in our lives.
Well, I have to commend you for doing this podcast and opening yourself up like that, because it's not easy. And doing this has probably really had you reaching into yourself too and exposing parts of you that you were never really comfortable with. So kudos to you for doing this.
But it's also really cool. Like I'm meeting like a lot of great people, and like if I didn't have the podcast, people I've never met at all.
Yeah.
Or like if I never like asked you to do the podcast, you know, we would just never even interact with each other at all. Like we didn't have a reason to talk to each other. And so like for me, it's like we're meeting new people, and like I think we'll have a great person. And if you're comfortable, I'd like to be friends with you in the future.
That's awesome.
Continue this.
Yeah.
Great thing.
That's awesome. Going. That's awesome. I love it. And that's what, to me, the rare disease community, it's just been a whole nother outlet of friendships and people that I so admire and so love. So it's been very cool. And just meeting has been right up there. Yeah. So thank you for reaching out to me. I really appreciate it.
Before I take the mic away from you, is there anything you want to add or promote or any closing thoughts?
You know, I'm on all social media if you want to find me. And if you have questions about mesothelioma, if your loved one has been diagnosed with mesothelioma, reach out to me. I can help walk you through it and get you really good resources.
So you can get financially compensated.
Yeah. Not only that, but that's not what it's about. It's more about the right medical care and the specialists and the support from the mesothelioma community to help you have the best outcome. So it's not about the money, you know, nobody gets rich, unfortunately, off of it. It's very sad, but you know, it's about taking care of one another and taking care of other people and offering hope. So that's what I do. That's what I try to
from
do.
the hour-and-a-half podcast. Heather knows her shit about mesothelioma, so definitely contact her. All her information will be in the description below. Thank you for everybody for listening and watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.